6:55 on a Friday morning. A black woman in a freshly pressed housekeeping uniform pushed open a teak door that weighed 80 kilograms. Her name was Camille Underwood. The plate flew before she had set down her bag. Wedgwood, cobalt blue. It missed her shoulder by 18 inches and broke against the wall behind her in 3 clean pieces. She did not flinch. She looked up the staircase. An 11-year-old boy stood on the 3rd step, breathing hard, hands empty. Below him, on the marble floor, stood a smaller boy, 7. He held 2 more plates, 1 in each hand, balanced like a waiter. He was watching her face. He was waiting to see if she would run. Behind her, the head housekeeper said 2 words.
Welcome to Friday.
3 nannies in 8 weeks, now her. She had 72 hours. The first plate had flown at minute 1. Plates at minute 1. 2 boys, looking like they've already won. I'm Kane Uncovers. I dig up the stories. Rich houses bury under their nicest rugs. The kids you just met? They're not the ones walking out of that gate 3 days from now. That's the part I want. At 5:30 in the morning, on the 3rd floor of a walk-up in the South Bronx, Camille Underwood folded a sandwich into wax paper. Turkey, mustard, no tomato, the way Hannah had liked it since she was 7. Hannah was 16 now. The kitchen was small. The kitchen was clean. On the open shelf above the stove, a framed diploma faced the wall. Master of Arts, Educational Psychology, Northwestern University, 2009. Camille had turned it around 14 months ago, the morning the bridge funding for Bronzeville Magnet was cut, and her position with it. Some mornings, she did not need to look at what she used to be. She tied her hair back at the nape with a navy elastic band. The contract from the agency was on the counter. 3 pages. Domestic placement. 72 hours. Live-in. No childcare contact. Greenwich, Connecticut. There was a footnote at the bottom of page 2 she had skimmed but not read carefully. Client requests applicant from Greater Metro Chicago background. She had grown up on the South Side. The line had felt routine. Hannah was still asleep down the hall. Camille left the sandwich on the kitchen table, beside an envelope marked Tour Deposit. $1,400, due Friday at 5. The contract paid $1,200. Tip, if anyone tipped, would close the gap. She took the bus to the train to the car to a gate. At 5:30 in the morning, on the 3rd floor of a colonial mansion in Greenwich, Gregory Whitman was already on a phone call. He was 53. He had been the chief executive of Whitman Aldridge Capital for 19 years. The merger he was negotiating would be announced Monday. Vance Holdings, $480 million. Harrison Vance was old school. He believed money was a measure of character, not the other way around. He had asked to come to the house Sunday afternoon. He wanted to see what Greg's home felt like. He was bringing his wife and his 9-year-old daughter, Lily. Whitman scrubbed his hand across his jaw. He had not shaved. On his desk was a leather calendar, open to October. The line that read, Memorial, Eleanor, had been crossed out and rewritten 3 times, each time later than the last. Each crossing out was a different color of ink. The 3rd time, he had used pencil. Margaret Doyle knocked once and came in without waiting. Margaret was 58. She had been the head housekeeper of the Whitman house for 22 years. She did not knock for permission. She knocked for warning. She set a folded sheet of paper on his desk. She said, Mrs. Caldwell left at 11 last night. The replacement arrives at 6:55. The folded sheet was a resignation note. Caldwell was the 3rd nanny in 8 weeks. Margaret had set the note at exactly 30 degrees off the edge of the desk, angled so Whitman would have to turn his head to read it. He turned his head. The note was 4 sentences. The 3rd sentence read, They are not difficult. They are unanswered, Margaret said. The first one quit because of Bennett. The second because of Holden. The 3rd because she was afraid of both. The new one comes from a domestic agency. She is not coming for the boys. She is coming for the floors. Whitman closed his eyes. In the foyer downstairs, 3 rectangles of brighter paint marked the wall where Eleanor's portraits had been removed. Eleanor had been 39. She had died 8 months ago, on a county road, alone, in light rain, in a Volvo, with new tires. There had been no other car. There had been no other driver. 8 weeks, 3 nannies. He had not buried his wife yet. By 7:20 in the morning, Camille had been inside the house for 25 minutes and had been told 3 times where she was not allowed to go. Margaret took her through the staff hallway, the laundry, the back stair. East wing only. Do not initiate conversation with the boys. Do not look at Mr. Whitman during meals. Do not enter the bedroom on the 3rd floor with the white lacquer door. That was Mrs. Whitman's. Margaret recited the rules without warmth and without contempt, the way a mechanic recites torque settings. Her left hand kept brushing the inside of her right wrist, where a thin gold bracelet sat tight against the skin. At 8:10, Bennett came down the front staircase in pajamas, threw a paperback copy of Treasure Island over the banister, and went back up. The book hit the marble face down, pages bent. Camille walked across the foyer. She picked up the book. She straightened the pages. The book had fallen open to page 40, the chapter where Jim Hawkins climbs into the apple barrel and listens to the men plot to kill his friends. Jim does not run. Jim listens. She closed the book. She set it carefully on the 3rd step, spine up, so whoever came down next could not miss it. At 8:35, while dusting the lower shelves of the library, she found the things that did not belong in a library. A model train on its side, on the 3rd stair from the top. A child's hair ribbon, lavender, looped around an armchair. The Whitmans had no daughter. And under the library table, taped to the inside of the apron, a folded piece of notebook paper. She crouched, read it where it hung, and stood again. The paper was a list. The title, in 11-year-old script, read, "Ways to Make the New Lady Leave." 9 items. The handwriting changed twice. Some lines were Bennett's right-leaning script. Some lines were a smaller, all-caps print that pressed harder into the paper. Throw food. Refuse schoolwork. Break her shoes. Cry at night. Tell her we are allergic to everything. Hide her bag. Say her name wrong. Not eat what she cooks. Tell her about Mom. She did not take the list. She did not photograph it. She understood 3 things. This was not a tantrum. This was a campaign. The 2 boys had divided the work. The older built the structure. The younger volunteered the steps that required hands. And item 9, the only item without an instruction attached, was the one that mattered most. These boys were not trying to break her. They were trying to protect their mother. At 10:30, Camille was on a folding stool dusting the top shelf when Holden walked past. He did not look at her. He carried a small bottle of Pelican India ink, lid off. The bottle tipped. Black ink ran over his thumb and onto her left shoe, the only shoe in her bag for the 72 hours. Camille stepped down. She looked at her shoe. She looked at Holden, who had stopped 2 paces past the doorway and was watching her face. She said, "Thank you for showing me which shoes I should not wear in this house." She unlaced both shoes. She set them outside the library door. She walked the rest of the day in stocking feet. Holden stood for 4 full seconds. Then he walked away. At 11:40, Bennett shouted from upstairs, "I will not eat lunch!" and slammed his door so hard the chandelier hummed for a count of 6. 2 seconds later, Holden shouted the exact same sentence. Same volume, same cadence. It was not echo, it was loyalty. At 12:05, Camille carried a tray up the staff stair with 2 sandwiches. She set it down between the doors, 6 feet from each. "This is here if you want it. I will not be back to take it away." She walked downstairs. When she returned at 1, the tray was on the kitchen island, both sandwiches untouched. Holden was standing 6 feet away in sock feet, watching her. He walked to the trash, lifted the lid, and placed both sandwiches in. He set the lid back down. He looked at her. Camille said, "Thank you for showing me you are not hungry yet. I will leave a different plate at 3. At 3, she did not bring food to a door. She sliced a single Honeycrisp apple in 8 wedges, fanned them on a small white plate, and carried it to the deep windowsill that overlooked the back garden, where, twice that morning, she had seen Holden stand and watch a cardinal in the holly hedge. At 3:45, the plate was empty. The peels were placed in the trash, 8 curls in a row. He spilled ink on her shoes. She thanked him for the warning. The crisis began at 5:48 in the evening, and like most crises in that house, it began as a misread. Whitman walked into Holden's room without knocking, looking for the boy because Margaret had said the boy had been quiet for too long. Quiet in that house was not safe. Holden was on his bedroom floor, on his knees beside an open backpack. Whitman saw, in a single sweep, what was inside. 3 Honeycrisp apples, the apples from Camille's 3 o'clock plate. A folded printout of the Metro North New Haven line schedule, ringed in pencil at the Greenwich stop and at Grand Central. $4.25 in coins, sorted by denomination, stacked. A pair of outdoor boots, laced, beside the bag. Whitman said, "What are you doing?" Holden bolted. He ran past his father, down the hall, into the room with the white lacquer door. He crossed the room. He went into Eleanor's walk-in closet. He shut the door. He locked it from inside. Whitman pounded. He shouted his son's name. Holden, on the other side, said, "I have her pills." Whitman went still. Margaret was already on the staircase. She stood behind him in the doorway. She did not enter. She turned her head down the hall where Bennett, barefoot, 11, had appeared at the top of the front stairs. Bennett spoke once, quietly, only to Margaret. He took it from her drawer. "It's not pills. It's her hand cream, the lavender one. He took the wrong jar." Margaret walked, fast, down the back stair, into the library, and said 3 words to Camille. "East Wing rule. Suspended." Camille came down off the stool. She did not run. She walked. She went up the back stair, past Whitman, into Eleanor's bedroom. She did not look at Whitman. He was shouting at the door. She raised her hand without looking at him, palm down, and lowered it once, slowly, the way a conductor cuts off a note. Whitman stopped shouting. Camille sat on the floor, 6 feet from the closet door. Not 5, not 7. Close enough to be heard, far enough not to be a threat. She put her back against the foot of the bed. The room smelled of lemon polish. Margaret had kept polishing on Eleanor's old schedule, Tuesdays and Fridays, the grief of routines. She said, "Holden, my name is Camille. I'm sitting on the floor across from the closet. I'm not going to come closer. I'm going to tell you what I see in this room." She named 3 things, slowly. "I see a yellow sweater on the chair by the window. I see your father's coat on the bedroom door. I see a glass of water on the dresser, half full." Silence. She added one more, carefully. "There is lemon polish on this floor. Your mother liked that smell. The room still smells like the day she chose." A long pause. Holden said, in a voice that cracked at both ends, "You don't know my mom." Camille said, "I don't, but I know what hiding feels like. I'm not going to make you come out. I will be here." She did not move. At 6:02, Whitman entered the doorway behind her. She did not turn. She trusted him to read the room. He read it. He stayed. At 6:05, the closet door clicked. It opened 4 inches. A small pale blue jar of hand cream rolled out across the floorboards and stopped 2 feet from Camille's right shoe. Crabtree and Evelyn, lavender, hand therapy. Camille picked up the jar. She read the label aloud, quietly. "Lavender hand cream. This was your mother's." The closet door opened a foot. Holden stepped out. He was barefoot. He had taken the boots off in the closet so the laces wouldn't tap. Camille did not stand up. She did not open her arms. She extended her right hand, palm up, in the air between them. Holden walked across the floor. He looked at her palm for a long time. He chose 2 fingers, index and middle. He wrapped his small hand around the tips of those two fingers and did not let go. Camille said, "Thank you. I've got you." Whitman, in the doorway, breathed in for what sounded like the first time since 5:48. Bennett, behind Margaret, looked at Camille for the first time since the plate had flown. He held the look, then turned and walked back to his room and shut the door. But he did not slam it. Whitman crouched. He put a hand on Holden's back. Holden did not pull away. Then Whitman's face changed. He stood up. His eyes got hard. He said, "Who told you to enter that room?" Camille was still on the floor. She did not stand. She kept her hand around Holden's two fingers. She said, "Your son did. He just hadn't learned my name yet." She did not look at Whitman. She looked at the closet floor, where the backpack sat with its mouth open, and where the corner of a folded train schedule was visible. Whitman did not see the schedule. Margaret did. She stepped into the bedroom for the first time in 8 months, walked to the closet, crouched, and with the quietest gesture Camille had ever seen one woman make for another, slid the schedule the rest of the way back into the bag and zipped it closed. She handed the bag to Camille. She said nothing. Camille took the bag. She kept the cream. She kept the apples. She kept the $4.25 she pretended not to see. A 7-year-old packed 3 apples and a Metro North map. That's not a tantrum. That's a plan. And the part that gets me, she didn't tell on him. She just held it for him. At 6:30, Margaret Doyle walked into Whitman's third-floor study and set a thick blue folder on his desk. She did not knock. She placed it squarely on his blotter, and she stood beside the desk with her hands at her sides and waited. Whitman opened the folder. Page 1. Master of Arts, Educational Psychology, Northwestern, 2009. Honors. Thesis title, Anchored Returns, a Framework for Re-Entry After Acute Loss in Children Under 12. Page 2. 12 years at Bronzeville Magnet, Chicago Public Schools, Tier 3 Trauma Specialist. 3 commendations, 1 state award. Position eliminated last October. Budget cut. Pages 3 and 4. 2 journal articles, photocopied, with passages highlighted in yellow. The article in Trauma and Childhood Quarterly, June 2022, contained one phrase highlighted twice. They are not difficult. They are unanswered. Page 5. Anchored Returns Framework, currently in use at 18 Chicago public schools. 312 teachers trained. Page 6. A letter from the Illinois Department of Education 3 weeks ago, inviting the framework's lead author to consult on a state-level rollout. Unanswered. A post-it on the corner read, "Declined, schedule conflict, domestic shift, Greenwich, Connecticut." Whitman did not move. Margaret said in a voice that had no edge in it because it did not need one, "You hired her to dust. The agency knew." He heard the first sentence. He did not hear the second. In the doorway behind him, Camille appeared. She had left Holden, finally asleep, in Bennett's room, on Bennett's bed, with Bennett sitting cross-legged at the foot of it, reading a book he had not opened in 8 months. Whitman turned. His face did several things, none of them clean. He said, "Why?" It was the only word he could find. Camille leaned her shoulder against the doorframe. She had not been invited in. She said, "Hannah's tour deposit is $1,400, and it was due Friday at 5. The contract paid $1,200 plus tip. I needed $1,200. I am not ashamed of either job." Whitman said, "You should have told us who you were." Camille said, "You hired a maid. I came to be a maid. I did the job I was paid for until the job I was trained for walked into a closet." A pause. She said, quieter, "There is one more thing you should know before we talk about anything else." Whitman waited. Camille said, "Your 7-year-old has run away from this house twice in 8 weeks. The second time, he reached the train platform on foot. He had 3 quarters and a $1 bill. He was buying a ticket to Brooklyn. The third attempt was packed and ready in his closet tonight. He's not running from you. He's running to her grave. Fire me if you want. He will try again." Whitman did not speak. Margaret picked up the post-it from the open folder, peeled it off, and put it in her apron pocket. He had hired her to dust. She had built a curriculum. Saturday morning at 7:10, Whitman came down to the staff kitchen alone. He had not slept. He had sat in his study from 6:30 the night before until 4 in the morning, rereading a folder he should have been handed 8 weeks earlier. He found Camille at the counter, washing a teacup that did not need washing. He set a piece of paper beside her. $5,000. Bonus. For last night. Camille turned off the tap. She dried the cup with a linen towel and set it in the cabinet, handle out. She said, "No." She said, "I'll stay through Monday morning, the way the contract says. I don't need a bonus. I need 4 things, and you don't have to agree to all of them." She listed them, evenly. 1. 90 minutes, twice a day, with both boys. No other staff in the room. 2. Total authority over the environment. What goes in, what comes out, who interrupts. 3. No nanny title, no therapist title. For the next 48 hours, I am a guest in your house. After Monday, you decide what I am to you, and I decide what you are to me. 4. If at any point either boy asks me to leave the room, I leave, without negotiation. Whitman wrote them on the back of a sheet torn from a leather notepad. He signed his initials at the bottom, G.W. She folded the paper into quarters and put it in the front pocket of her uniform. She said, "First session is at 9. Have them awake, have them fed, have them not yelled at." She walked out. At 9, in the library, Camille placed a single shoebox in the middle of the long oak table. The shoebox was old. The corners were soft. On the side, in pencil and handwriting that was Camille's but younger, were the words, "Mama's things. Do not throw out." Bennett came in first. 3 paces inside the door, arms crossed. He did not sit. Holden came in second. He sat on the rug and pulled a throw pillow into his lap. Camille said, "This is a memory box. We'll use it once a day. I'll go first because I'm the new one." She lifted the lid. She took out, one by one, 3 blank index cards, 3 by 5 inches, a dried lavender sachet in a small muslin pouch, a mechanical Heuer stopwatch with a chip on the minute hand, and a hand mirror, wooden frame, walnut, with a crack running diagonally across the lower right corner of the wood, repaired once with a small brass pin. She held the mirror up. She said, "The rule is the first person to take something out has to tell a true thing about it. I was 9 when my mother died. After she died, I would not let anyone touch my hair. For 2 years, I did my own, badly. When I was 11, I sat in front of this mirror, this exact mirror, and I learned to French braid my own hair on the back of my own head. It took me 4 months. The crack is from the morning I got it right and threw the mirror at the wall because I was so angry it had taken me 4 months to do something my mother used to do for me in 2 minutes." She set the mirror in the middle of the table, glass up. She said, "You don't have to say anything today. You don't have to say anything tomorrow. The mirror stays. The shoebox stays. I leave the room now for 15 minutes. She walked out. In the library, the 2 boys sat in silence for 2 full minutes. Then Holden got up off the rug, walked to the table, picked up an index card and a pencil, and drew a train. Engine, passenger car, caboose. Underneath, on the rails, he wrote in careful all caps, "Brooklyn." He set the card in the open shoebox. Bennett did not draw a card. Bennett walked to the bookshelf, took down Treasure Island, sat in the wing chair, and opened it to the first page he had not read since June. When Camille came back at 9:15, she did not ask about the train card. She picked up a blank card herself, drew a small picture, a train station, a single figure on the platform, a woman with her hair up, and placed her card beside Holden's. She said, "That's my drawing for today. The woman is my mother. She used to wait for me at the train station after school. She always met me at the wrong door." Holden looked at her for the first time without flinching. 12 seconds. Then he stood up off the rug and walked across the library and sat on the floor beside Camille's chair. He did not touch her. He just sat. Bennett finished 4 pages of Treasure Island before Camille said it was time for lunch. He had not turned a page in 8 months. The afternoon session started at 2. It started with a test. 18 minutes in, Bennett, who had not spoken all morning, looked at her across the table and said, in a voice as flat as the voice he had used to throw the plate, "You don't get to talk about my mom." Camille had been waiting for this since item 9 on the list under the library table. She did not lean forward. She did not raise her voice. "I didn't talk about your mom. I talked about mine. I will not talk about your mom unless you ask me to." Bennett held her eyes for a long time. He looked away first. He said, very quietly, "Okay." It was the first word he had said inside the library, with her, all day. By 3:45, Camille's small canvas bag was missing from the staff coat hook. She did not look for it. She did not ask. She walked into the library at 4 o'clock and read aloud, from page 41, the passage where Jim Hawkins, hidden in the apple barrel, listens. At 7:30, after dinner, Camille walked alone into Eleanor's closet and sat down on the closet floor with her back against the inside wall. She did not turn on the light. She did not call for Holden. At 7:48, the closet door opened. Holden walked in. He had her canvas bag over one shoulder. He set the bag in her lap. He said, "Mom liked this closet. It smells like her hands." Camille said, "Then we'll come back here together. Not tonight. When you're ready." Holden sat beside her, not touching, for 6 minutes. Then he stood up and walked out. Earlier that afternoon, Bennett had walked past the open door of the laundry room and seen Margaret folding a blue silk scarf that did not belong to any current member of the household. Margaret was holding it across her palms. Bennett stopped in the doorway. "That was Mom's." Margaret did not look up. "I know." At 8:15, Bennett walked into the small guest room that had been given to Camille. He stood in the doorway. "Do you do this for other kids?" Camille said, "For 12 years. Bennett said, "Would my mom have liked you?" Camille said, "Your mother would have wanted you to be talking to someone who knew how. I am honored she chose me without knowing she was choosing me." Bennett took an index card from a small stack on the bedside table and placed it on the edge of the bed beside her bag. Not inside. Not in any box. Beside. He walked out without speaking. The card read, "Mom liked the way you fold towels." That same night, Whitman opened a sealed condolence card from his sister-in-law that had sat in his desk drawer for 8 months. The third sentence read, "Talk to your boys. They are not waiting forever." At 9:50, Holden walked into the guest room and placed, on Camille's pillow, a single Honeycrisp apple, the last from his backpack, and an index card. The card read, in 7-year-old all caps, "For the bus tomorrow." He thought she was leaving. Sunday morning at 11:30, the phone in Whitman's study rang. Vance had moved the time up. He would be at the gate by 4:30 with his wife and his daughter Lily, instead of 5:15. Whitman went down 2 flights and stopped at the open door of the small guest room where Camille had slept. He knocked twice on the doorframe, the way you knock on the door of a guest, not staff. Vance moved the time up. 4:30. He's bringing Lily. Camille said, "How much time?" Whitman said, 4 hours and 45 minutes. "Would you be present in any capacity?" Behind him, Margaret had come up the back stair without sound. She is contracted as domestic staff. The optics of using her in front of an investor's family are not optics this house can afford. Camille understood, in the second she heard the word optics, that Margaret was not objecting to her being seen. Margaret was objecting to her being used. Whitman did not understand it that way. He turned to Margaret and said, loudly enough for it to carry up the front stair, "She is the most qualified person in this house." On the second floor, Bennett, who had been listening, the way he had been listening to every adult conversation in that house for 8 months, stood up. He walked into his bedroom. He turned the lock. Through the door, in a voice that was not yelling and was somehow more alarming than any yelling, he said, "I'm not going down. I'm not performing for anyone." In the guest room, Holden, who had been sitting on the rug at Camille's feet, stood up and walked, without looking at her, to the kitchen, took out a carton of strawberries, carried it through the house, into Eleanor's bedroom, into the closet, and closed the door behind him. He did not lock it. The message was the same. Camille had 4 hours and 43 minutes left. She went to Bennett first because Bennett was the one who had said it out loud. She did not knock. She sat down on the runner outside his door, 6 feet down the hall, with Treasure Island in her lap. She opened it to page 41 and she read aloud, calmly, the passage where Jim Hawkins, hidden inside an apple barrel, listens. She read for 20 minutes. At 1:30, Bennett's door opened 6 inches. "Why are you reading that?" Camille said. "Because you dropped this book on Friday. I marked the page where Jim hides." Bennett said, "He doesn't hide. He listens." Camille said, "That's right. I forgot." She told him then about Lily Vance. That Lily was 9. That Lily had not spoken to a stranger in 2 years. That Lily had a condition called selective mutism, which usually meant a child had something they desperately wanted to say and could not find a room safe enough to say it. She told him Lily liked engineering, bridges specifically. Lily was coming at 4:30 whether anyone was ready or not. She did not say what she wanted from him. She let it sit. At 2:15, Bennett opened the door the rest of the way. He led her around his bed and pulled away a draped overcoat from the alcove behind it. On the workbench underneath, mounted on foam core, was a model of the Brooklyn Bridge. 1:200 scale, built from basswood and brass and fishing line. It was not finished. The center span was open. The cables were loose. He had stopped building it 8 months ago, the week his mother died. Camille looked at the bridge for a long time. "Whose work is this?" Bennett said, "Mine." Camille said, "Then no one performs anything today. I'll come back." She walked downstairs and found Whitman on the phone in the foyer. When he was off the call, she said, "Bennett doesn't host anyone. Bennett shows Lily his bridge. That's not a performance. That's a tour. The difference is the entire point." Whitman said, "And Holden?" "Holden brings his trains, if he wants. He decides where to put them. He decides whether to come into the room at all. We do not coach a 7-year-old to run cover for a $480 million conversation." Whitman said, "And if Bennett refuses?" Camille said, "Then I sit with Bennett upstairs. You serve coffee. You explain to Mr. Vance exactly and without softening that your son lost his mother 8 months ago and is not available to be a host today. And then we see what kind of man Mr. Vance is." Whitman did not answer for a long time. Then he said, "I have spent 8 months pretending I am the only one in this house who lost her." Camille said, "I know." She went up to Eleanor's closet at 3. She did not knock. She sat down outside the closed door. "Holden, there's a girl coming who hasn't talked to a stranger in 2 years. Your brother is going to show her his bridge. If you bring your trains, they will be there. If you stay here, that is also fine. I'm telling you what is happening because you deserve to know." At 3:30, the closet door opened. Holden walked out with the strawberry carton, 3 eaten, the rest untouched. He went to his room, came back with his train set, and set the train set on the library table exactly 3 feet from Bennett's bridge. Not closer, not on the bridge, 3 feet. It was the position he had chosen. Close enough to be present, far enough not to be required. Pause with me here, friend. $480 million on one side. An 11-year-old who finally said the word mine on the other. The dad picked the kid. I want you to feel the weight of that, because most fathers in that house don't. At 4:30 in the afternoon on Sunday, the gate at the end of the Whitman Drive opened, and a charcoal Mercedes sedan rolled up the gravel. Harrison Vance got out of the front passenger seat first. 60 years old, dark coat, no tie. His wife came around from the driver's side. Mrs. Vance had driven, as she always did when their daughter was in the car. She opened the back door. Lily stepped out. She was 9. She wore a navy dress with a small, enameled hedgehog pinned at the collar. She did not let go of her mother's hand. She did not look at the house. In the foyer, Whitman opened the front door himself. "Harrison, welcome. Beth, Lily, hello. My boys are in the library. Bennett has been working on a model. He'd like to show it to you." He did not say show you. He said show it to you. The pronoun did the work. Bennett was not on display. The bridge was. Mrs. Vance looked at her husband. Vance looked at the foyer ceiling for a long second, then back at Whitman. "Lead the way." In the library, Bennett stood beside the long oak table. The bridge was on the table. The angle-poised lamp had been pulled down low so the light raked across the bridge from the side, the way an architect would light a model. The drapes were half drawn. Camille was sitting in the wing chair under the window, away from the table, with a book in her lap. She did not stand when the Vances came in. Holden was on the rug, between the table and the wing chair. His train set was 3 feet from the bridge. The locomotive was facing the bridge. The cars trailed behind it, waiting. Bennett did not say hello. He looked at the floor. He did not move. Lily, behind her mother, did not say hello either. She looked at the bridge. Whitman cleared his throat once, and Camille, without looking up from her book, gave him a single, small headshake. He stayed quiet. 22 minutes passed. The first 8 minutes, no one said anything. Lily stood in the doorway holding her mother's hand. Bennett stood at the table with his hands at his sides. Vance and Whitman stood near the bookshelves, hands in their pockets. Mrs. Vance crouched once to whisper something in Lily's ear, and Lily did not respond. At the 8th minute, Bennett, without looking up, leaned forward over the table and adjusted, with the tip of one finger, a strut at the base of the Brooklyn side tower. The strut had been 1 degree off true. He set it true. He did not explain. Lily watched him do it. She let go of her mother's hand. The next 14 minutes, Bennett worked. He did not look at the visitors. He tightened a cable. He repositioned a small basswood cap on the New York side anchor. He flipped open a small notebook on the table, graph paper, his handwriting, calculations, and crossed out a number and wrote a smaller one. At the 23rd minute, Lily walked across the rug. She stopped on the opposite side of the table from Bennett. She said, in a voice that was almost a whisper, but came out with the full word, "Is that a Pratt truss?" Bennett did not look up. "It started as one. I changed the bottom cord." Mrs. Vance, in the doorway, put her hand to her mouth. Vance turned his head slowly toward his wife and did not move it back. Lily said, "Why?" Bennett said, "Because the original wouldn't hold a train." Lily said, "What kind of train?" Bennett, finally, looked up. "A grief train." Mrs. Vance closed her eyes. Lily nodded. She did not laugh. She did not ask what he meant. "That's why the cord is heavier." Bennett said, "Yeah." For the next 11 minutes, the 2 children spoke in language the adults could mostly follow, but knew better than to interrupt. Load distribution, cable stays, Bennett's mistake at the 3rd pier, where he had used 12-pound test fishing line instead of 15 because he had run out at the hardware store and hadn't wanted to ask his father for a ride. Lily's suggestion that he reverse 2 of the suspender ropes to redistribute weight. Bennett's quiet, "Yeah, that would work." At the 11th minute, Holden, who had been sitting completely still on the rug, picked up a single passenger car from his train set, walked to the table, and held the car up. He looked at his brother. Bennett looked back. He did not speak. He held out his palm. Holden placed the passenger car in Bennett's palm. Bennett walked the car to the open center span of the bridge and set it down on the deck. The deck held. The car balanced. Lily smiled. It was a small smile, and a very brief one, and the first time anyone in the Vance family had seen Lily smile in front of a stranger in 2 years. Mrs. Vance turned her face into her husband's shoulder. Vance, who had not spoken in 23 minutes, touched his wife's elbow once, drew her gently back into the foyer, and walked Whitman to the window at the far end of the hall. He said very quietly, "Greg." Whitman waited. Vance said, "I came here to evaluate your capital structure. I am leaving with something else." He took Whitman's cross pen from Whitman's breast pocket. He uncapped it. He turned the term sheet over on the windowsill, the term sheet that had been folded and tucked in his coat the entire afternoon, and signed his name on the back, beside his initials, and dated it. 5:42 p.m. He capped the pen. He put the pen back in Whitman's breast pocket. "Tell me one thing, off the record. Who is the woman in the wing chair?" Whitman said, "She came on Friday morning to clean the floors." Vance looked at him. Whitman said, "She is the most qualified person in this house, and she will not be cleaning floors here again." Vance nodded. "Good answer. Beth and Lily and I will leave you alone now. Your son is busy." In the library, Bennett and Lily were redrawing the calculations on a fresh sheet of graph paper. Holden had moved a second train car onto the bridge. Camille was still in the wing chair, her book closed. She had closed his deal by refusing to use his son. That night, after the Vances had driven away, Whitman came into the kitchen and stood across the island from Camille. "I owe you the merger." Camille said, "You owe your son a conversation. The merger was incidental." She said it without heat. She meant it. "What do I say to him?" Camille said, "Don't perform an apology. Tell him one true thing about his mother. Then ask him one question. Then listen until he stops talking, even if he stops 3 times and starts again. The hard part is the silence between." Whitman went upstairs. He sat on Bennett's bed for 40 minutes. When he came down at 10:30, his shirt collar was wet at the side. He had not cried since Eleanor's funeral. Monday morning at 6 a.m, Camille folded the last of her clothing into her bag. The contract ended at 6:55. The car service was confirmed for 6:55. She left the small shoebox in the middle of the long oak table in the library, open. Inside the box, she left every card that had been placed in it, plus one new card in her own hand that read, "I was honored to be here." She did not sign it. They knew the handwriting. She left the lavender sachet on top of the cards. She left the cracked frame mirror beside the box. She kept the train schedule from Holden's backpack folded in her front pocket. At 6:30, Margaret was waiting in the foyer. She was wearing a winter coat, although the morning was not cold. She held a small cream envelope in her right hand. She handed Camille the envelope. "I have wanted to give you this since the night Mrs. Caldwell left. I am giving it to you now because I did not want you to leave this house without knowing why I made the call I made on Thursday night." Camille opened the envelope. Inside was a black and white photograph, 2.5 by 3.5 inches. 2 young women, summer of 1999, on a porch in central Connecticut. One was 22, light-haired, laughing, in a sundress. The other was 31, dark hair pulled back, arm around the younger woman's shoulders. The dark-haired woman was Margaret Doyle, much younger. The light-haired woman was Eleanor. On the back, in Margaret's handwriting, it said, "She would have liked you. Thank you for arriving when I called the agency. M." Camille looked at the photograph for a long time. "You're her aunt," Margaret said, "her mother's youngest sister. I came to work in this house when Eleanor married him, and I stayed because she stayed. I have been sleeping here since the night she died, in a guest room down the hall from the boys, and I have not been able to do for them what they needed, because I am a part of what is missing. The agency had your name in a footnote of an article. I read the article in March. I have been waiting for the call to come back to your name since June." Camille folded the photograph into the envelope. She put the envelope in her front pocket beside the train schedule. She said, "Thank you. You did the hardest part. You let someone you didn't know walk in." Margaret nodded once. "He has an offer for you. Read it on the bus." She handed Camille a second envelope, larger, white, sealed. Camille put it under her arm. At 6:48, Whitman came into the foyer. He was already dressed for the day. His hair was wet. He had not slept again. He said, "I am not going to ask you to stay this morning. I want to give you the offer in writing first, the way you asked, and let you read it on your own time. There is one thing I want to say before you read anything." Camille waited. "I hired a woman to dust. I almost fired the same woman for saving my son. I want to be on the record about both of those facts before you read anything I have written down." Camille said, "I appreciate that. The car is at the gate. I'll walk you out." She said, "Just to the door, please, not the gate." He understood. At 6:52, Camille opened the front door. Mist hung over the lawn. The driveway gravel was darker than it had been on Friday morning. She took 2 steps onto the front portico. Behind her, on the staircase, came the sound of feet running. Bennett came down first, in pajamas, barefoot. He passed his father in the foyer without looking at him. He went straight through the front door and around Camille and down the portico steps and stopped in the gravel of the drive between her and the waiting town car. He was breathing hard. He said one word, "Please." His face was wet. He was not wiping his face. Behind him, Holden, barefoot, in the same pajamas he had been wearing on Friday night, came running down the portico steps and threw his arms around Camille's left leg and held on with both hands. He said, "Don't go, don't go, don't go, don't go." He held out his right hand. In his right hand was the Metro North New Haven line schedule. He pressed it into Camille's hand. On the back, in pencil, in 7-year-old all caps, were the words, "You take this, so you know how to come back." Camille knelt down on the gravel. She set her bag beside her. She did not pull either boy off her. She spoke to Bennett first. "I am not leaving you. I am leaving this contract. There is a difference. I am going to read your father's offer on the bus. I will come back on Friday, to start if I say yes, to say goodbye properly if I say no. Either way, I will be back at this gate on Friday morning." Bennett said, "Promise." Camille said, "I don't promise. I commit. That is stronger." She turned to Holden. "You gave me a map. That means you trust me to know how to come back. I will read it on the bus, and I will not throw it away." Holden took the small lavender sachet she had given him on Saturday night out of his pajama pocket and pressed it into her hand. "You take this. I'll have the box." Camille put the sachet in her front pocket beside the photograph. She stood up. Bennett did not move out of the way. She said, "I have to step around you. I will be back on Friday." Bennett stepped to the side. He put his hand briefly on Holden's shoulder, the way Whitman had finally put his hand on Bennett's shoulder the night before. The gesture was learned, and it was new, and it was already the right size. Camille walked to the car. The car door closed. The car pulled forward through the gate. In the foyer doorway, Whitman stood for a long time without moving. Then he sat down on the second step of the front staircase, in his suit, and put his face in his hands. It was the first time he had cried where his sons could see him. When he looked up, Bennett was standing in the doorway, watching him. Bennett crossed the foyer, sat down on the second step beside his father, leaned his head against his father's shoulder, and stayed there. Holden came in after him, sat down on the step below them, and held his brother's bare foot in both of his hands, the way you hold a small bird. Bennett begged with one word. Holden begged with a map. Monday evening at 8:15, on the 3rd floor of a walk-up in the South Bronx, Camille sat at her own kitchen table. The lamp was on. The tea was black, in the chipped white mug Hannah had given her in middle school. The knitted coaster Hannah had made in 7th grade was under the mug, slightly damp at the edge. Across the table, Hannah was rewriting the second paragraph of her college application essay. The essay was about an adult who had taught her that waiting is a skill. The adult was her mother. Hannah had not yet shown her mother the draft. Between them on the table sat 3 things, side by side. The sealed white envelope from Whitman, unopened. A folded Metro North schedule with 7-year-old handwriting on the back. A black and white photograph from 1999 of 2 young women on a porch, one of them already gone. Hannah looked up. "Mom, what's the map for?" Camille said, "A 7-year-old gave it to me so I would know how to come back. I think Friday morning I'm going to use it." Hannah said, "Are you going to take the offer?" Camille said, "I'm going to read it on the bus, the same way I read the original contract on Friday." She lifted her tea. She said, more to herself than to her daughter. The hardest skill in any room is rarely the loudest. Friday was 3 days away. A 7-year-old had given her a map. An 11-year-old had given her a word. A father had given her the silence he should have given his sons 8 months ago. A housekeeper had given her a photograph of a woman who would have liked her. Some people don't need a stage. They just need a door to walk back through. If this story sat with you the way it sat with me, a quiet subscribe and a like help us keep telling stories about people the world tries hard not to see. And if there's a quiet one in your life, the steady one, the one nobody thanks, send this to them tonight. They have waited long enough to be seen.